Hello, and welcome to the Womb Centered Healing Podcast. I'm Selma Morningstar, and I have Denicia here with me. Thank you so much for joining me, Denicia. I've
Yeah.
been enjoying the company of Denicia on various podcast interviews, both her podcast and my podcast, and various online summits, both her summits and my summits. For a couple of years now, we've been going back and forth with interviews, and it's just a delight to talk with you. Denicia I'm going to let you introduce yourself because I could never remember the exact name of I know you're an acupuncturist, but with a specialty in fertility and reproductive health. But I know there's a special way that you say it. So I'm just going to let you introduce yourself and let us know who you are, what you're passionate about in your work. And the topic we're discussing today is why women are bleeding too much. There's a lot of women out there, and I've had lots of conversations with women in my capacity as a vaginal steam facilitator, where we really look at the menstrual cycle of each person and see what's going on for them and how we can support it coming into balance, and looking at what the menstrual cycle is telling us about any underlying health imbalances. And I know this is a big part of the work that you do, to take the menstrual cycle as a vital sign of how the overall health of a person is. And so I'm curious to hear what you have explored and the wisdom that you've gleaned from your study and experience working with your clients about what it means when women are bleeding too much.
Yeah. So thanks for having me again, of course. It's always fun when we get together
It
to
is.
meet.
It is.
Oh yes, we go back and forth. It's awesome. So right now, I've transitioned into really adopting into integrated healing, and what integrated healing really means as far as actually helping and facilitating this alignment of the spirit, mind, and body, and for oneself, but then also for the whole, because there is an impact there, right? And my background, as you were telling people, is important to me in the sense that, yes, that was like my stepping stone into coming into this place where I was in there focusing on menstrual health and fertility health. And then from that perspective, it's really seeing where I was limiting, others were limiting themselves into really just saying, well, I just want this healthier period, or I just want to have this healthy baby and healthy pregnancy. And then at the same time, I felt like there were some things that were just missing. And you and I would talk about those. And then it's just that now I'm like, you know what, we're going to go all in. And this is what I'm seeing. Right.
Mm-hmm.
So where now it's like menstrual health and fertility health, like those are actually just manifestations of greater issues.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's where, when you're coming into the integrated healing playground, is what I'm calling it, because we take this stuff so seriously that people literally don't enjoy their lives anymore, and they don't really understand that this is a healing journey. It's not really a destination. And so to really call yourself to being present into what you're experiencing right now, and in this case, it might be heavy bleeding. So in this place of integrated healing, what are you seeing? Become this 2-year-old and be curious about what's happening. Ask these questions of, why is this even happening? And really being open to exploring what that means. So is it something that you have experienced personally? Is it really your perspective on things? Where is it that things might need to shift in your life? And really applying that, where you have to come to see that what you're experiencing physically and what you're experiencing mentally and what you're experiencing emotionally are all messages coming in from your spirit. is just calling your attention. And so you're really going in there saying like, all right, so what is it? What is it about this? Am I to learn from this experience?
This is so powerful, Denise, and I love how you articulate it. And what it really brings up is uh, the need for us to shift from what many of us were taught in this world, that as far as your physical health is concerned, you relegate all responsibility and knowledge about that to the doctor.
Mm-hmm.
You don't get curious about it. You don't ask questions. You just take their word for it and do what they tell you to do. That's what a
Yeah.
lot of people were taught how to do. And there's a culture in the medical field that the patient trying to heal themselves is dangerous.
Yeah.
That the
Or
doctor,
that it's not even possible.
right, and that the
Yeah.
doctor needs to assert that they know better than you do about your health and well-being.
Mm-hmm.
And to a certain degree, that may be true in that they might have some knowledge from study and from experience about whatever ailment you have, but it's incomplete.
Yeah.
They don't have all the knowledge that's available out there. And so relegating that to a doctor is like,
It's disempowering.
it's disempowering. And the fact is, we have, as people, we have a huge resource of information about our health that we've been taught to disconnect from, which is the sensations and feelings in our own bodies and our
Right.
own intuitive sense of what's going on. I mean, when you start to get into intuitive self-healing, holistic self-healing practices, and you start hearing practitioners that really support that, you start hearing their stories about that, you start, reading books and listening to people talk about people who get information about their cancer in their dreams before it even shows up in the doctor's tests. And because they insist on the doctor's testing again and testing again, they catch it way early before it's ever even a big problem. And then it's not an issue because they dreamt about it long before the doctors would even ever, or if they would even feel a lump.
Yeah.
Right.
And
And so,
and that's like that. I was actually just speaking with a company the other day, because we were talking about like labs, and I was telling her, I said, look, the culture around labs needs to change. And because as it stands, people will literally limit their own healing capacity because a lab isn't there, or a lab hasn't even shown it.
mhm.
And so now, in my perception, the culture needs to shift, and it can happen from us as being patients, and then it can also happen with healthcare providers. So even then, they have come to rely on the lab test to even determine certain things. And so like when you how that affects you in your whole healing journey, this is why I impress, like I impress to really take a look at who's involved, because people hear that birds of a feather flock together, but they don't really think about it in other relationships than friends, right? Because you have all of these different relationships, and that includes who's on your healing team, right? And the thing is that even in your healing team, you're the leader. So you have to understand that you're a leader, and with leaders in other leadership capacities, they do employ intuition. They may not be open about it, but like some of them are very open, but others are not. But they do employ their own intuition. They do actually, they're grounded and they're centered in their own. They see a vision, and it's for the greater good, right? And then they fill in the gaps. They fill in with the people that can help move them towards that vision. And
Right.
so therefore you adopt that in your own, right? In your own space and in your own regard, because then when you do that, and you meet someone that is just like, no, this is the way I see it. This is how it's going to be. Um, and then practitioners that don't realize how much they speak either illness or health into people, so it's very subtle languaging, but it's very important languaging that has huge vibrational effects and in huge magnitude,
Mhm.
because you have it, there's not an honor to me anymore of what that relationship is, and between patient and practitioner, or client and practitioner. And so, like, when you're going into that, and when you honor that, like, you might come in with insight, and this is what happens with me, like, right? So, like, I might have insight on something, and I'll express it. At the same time, though, I'm honoring that this is their process, because guess what happens? They may or may not want to hear what I have to say. They may or may not want to do what I am suggesting, and that's okay. But during the whole time, I'm actually asking throughout the process, like, how does that feel to you? How does that resonate with you? Because that's a part of being involved, right? So that's a part of being involved in your own process and taking the active role. And
So
that
you're talking about how you relate to your clients. At first, I thought you were talking about how you relate to a practitioner that's going to help you with your health, because I'm sure you have those
it's
too.
both.
It's both. So we're looking at a relationship of partnership instead of a relationship of dominance, where the doctor has a dominant amount of information and authority and dominates our health. And instead, we're looking at cultivating a partnership relationship, so that the practitioner, whether it's me being the practitioner or you being the practitioner or whomever, and the client or patient are equal partners on a healing journey together, that one's opinion or intuition or information is no more valid than the other's intuition, opinion,
Right.
or information, and that both are responsible. My experience with many medical doctors is that they can't, with all their workload and the way that medical doctors are treated in the medical industry, as far as how much they're expected to work and how much they're given time to rest and like that. It's ridiculous. It's not humane, right?
Mhm.
I mean, the way medical school is run to begin with is not humane. It makes people, the long hours, being on call for 24 hours on it. There's no need for that. You could be on call for
So
8 hours.
so then imagine that's also a reason why they don't address, let me put it like this. That explains why they don't address those lifestyle issues as they
Yes,
see their patients, because they
because
themselves, it's their
don't have.
norm that you just go and you do. But then that same lifestyle, same beliefs into that's how you run your life is what is playing a role into what is presenting itself physically, mentally, and emotionally, right?
Yeah, and they
But
don't
then
have the bandwidth. They don't have the energy, the extra energy to then go and do extra research about a case that, about their client's situation, and to even keep up with the most modern, the most recent research. There's research going on all the time that's updating. And so most medical doctors, whenever they graduated from medical school and finished their whatever internship, or they haven't done any research into anything since then. And most of the time, what they're offering as remedies is, most of the time it's not really based on research. It's based on drug companies' propaganda and perks. Now, I'm speaking from experience of my dad going through medical school and being a resident at the hospital, and he got like free product from drug companies all the time, and promotional things, and they were constantly coming in and giving propaganda sales pitches to the doctors about why they should be prescribing this drug. And the more drugs they would prescribe, they would get these perks from the drug companies. and,
right.
and so that's where a lot of this, oh, you just give people drugs is coming from, instead of really doing the research and saying, what is actually working? What actually helps people? They don't have time for that. They're just, okay, these drugs are giving them to us. These are what we have available. These are the hospital policies. And it's very much in the United States, a profit-oriented business. Hospitals and, medical facilities, it's profit-oriented. I could go on about that for quite some time. But the truth is, we as patients, we may need the particular labs or testing or diagnosis that a medical doctor gives us, but we need to retain our autonomy and our authority, our own inner authority, and do our own research.
Yeah.
I feel. And don't listen to any doctor that's discouraging you from doing your own research.
Yeah.
Because those are the patients that are considered to be a pain in the behind. Are the ones who come in. There's a term for it. There's Dr. Google, and some doctors will even tell you, "Oh, you've been seeing Dr. Google, haven't you?" They'll totally, if you've been doing your own research and you come in and you talk about it with a doctor, some doctors will invalidate your research by making disparaging remarks to that effect. And I say, if that's happened to you, don't go back to that doctor. But the thing is, if we have certain insurance or whatever, then we're locked into seeing certain doctors, and it's just a mess. It's just a real mess. So I say, find a good holistic healing practitioner like Denicia, a naturopath in your area, or someone else that can help you navigate all of these things, and listen to my voice.
I think it's
all the time.
Well, it's like I feel like it boils down to that team that I was talking about, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so when you would have already done your inner assessment and inner inventory, right? And then you start to identify this is actually the life that I'd like to be living. This is what I'd like to be experiencing, right? Take away any symptoms that you might have, any disease that you might have. You take away any of that, but then you really just go and you focus and you're just like, what do I actually want to be experiencing? How do I even want to feel in this experience, right? And then from that perspective, the tools and the people will present itself. This is why I keep reiterating. I'll reiterate, well, I'm coming in for acupuncture. Why? Or I want herbs. For what? And I always, because if you come in tool first, to me, that's already a sign of disempowerment. Because that means then that you are now relying and you have given authority to the tool for your healing. So when you are really empowered meaning inward, you have inner authority. And then you are grounded in that, and you're able to visualize and be clear on what it is that you're doing, what you're looking for, and what you'd like to actually experience. Imagining and seeing your spirit, mind, and body are in alignment, then what's happening, the appropriate tool to help you to experience that will present itself.
This is so poignant, and I feel like what you're talking about and what your words are painting a picture of is drawing our power inward and containing it within us, okay? And we've been taught so often to give our power outward to some other authority, some tool, whatever it is. Acupuncture is going to fix me, whatever it is. And what you're saying, and I can imagine the conversations you have with your clients and patients of just reel it back in and ask that question: why do I need acupuncture? What's really going on? What is my inner authority telling me? And it seems like that direction of drawing our energy in and residing in our core center, wisdom, is the exact essential remedy for bleeding too much. Because what is that bleeding too much? but this flowing out of our core strength, our blood,
Mm-hmm.
and our core vitality uh, in inappropriate ways, where it's not being held, and it's not we're not receiving the nourishment that that we're meant to be having, because it's flowing out. And that's that same kind of flowing out of our power as we give it to others to tell us what we're supposed to do. And so that energetic um, mirroring that
Mm-hmm.
especially the womb can do, of if it's not able to retain that core vitality and is just bleeding out too much, what is that telling us? And this
Yeah.
line of inquiry is really important. Now, I'm not meaning to say that every person, every woman who's bleeding too much, is also putting their energy out to external authority, or their power out to external authority. But there may be some other version of that,
Yeah.
like what I wrote about is that one of the trauma responses that's so common in this day and age is that we do, there's fight, flight, freeze, and then fawning
Mm-hmm.
on the abuser or everyone when we're under chronic trauma. I feel is a big way that women particularly learn how to cope with a society that does not honor and uplift and nourish women.
Mm-hmm.
And so, in order to get that nourishment, to get that honor, to get that recognition somehow, to get that gratitude, to get that nourishment, we give more and more and more. And maybe one day someone will recognize me, someone will give back to me.
Which is actually still disempowering.
Exactly.
And like that is where when you come to the realization that ultimately you're seeking validation, and it comes in different masks. It comes in, oh, I want a seat at the table. Or, oh, well, I'm fighting for women being represented in Congress. Or I want to be at in that same conference room with so and so over there. Those are all different forms of disempowerment, because you're taking action for validation and approval of someone else, versus when it's turned around and it's coming from an empowering perspective. You realize that if you're moving from your core and in your purpose, it wouldn't matter. And then what happens is that environment, you create that environment around you. So then you're going to now exude that. Now this is where it gets very it's like you almost have to travel it with finesse, because you have because you're going to create this environment to always be mindful of that environment that you're creating. And when I say that you're creating the environment, it could be literally you taking the lead and bringing people around you, and you're creating a group, right? Or it could even be, well, this is where my mindset is, and so therefore I'm going to now be around these others. Like I have created now my tribe. And this is what's made it a little bit scary for me when that became popular, of find your tribe and all of that. What made me nervous about it was because then that was just another cord into distraction and disempowerment. Because people don't understand that when you buy into that, you're actually buying into a culture. So therefore, if your culture that's around you that you're buying into is just different masks, the people that are around you are just mirrors. They're masks. They're invitations for you to go inward and assess why it is that that person and what experience you have with them is there. That's giving you clues as to your own spirit, right? So if you are buying into all of this stuff about whatever it is that may come up when it comes to your care, whether it's women being treated a certain way, always ask, whatever action you take, where is that coming from? Am I making this choice out of fear that I won't be heard? If so, then that's a whole different other energy, right? Like, then I'm just going to go, and this is how I feel. This is what I'm going to express. And this is how I'm expressing it in a healthy way,
Mm-hmm.
despite who agrees with me or doesn't agree with me. Right. And so, like, a lot of when you're talking about reproductive health issues, that's tied into as well, like, and this is where I love Carolyn Meese and the interpretation there, especially when it comes to energy centers, because it is there. It's there. It's what is that you're buying into tribally, where it is that you were not given that space to come into some individualization of yourself. And so in the case of women, if you're talking about you're bleeding out and you're outpouring and all of that, if that's what's happening, really ask yourself, why are you doing that? And what ways is it that your tribes that are around you are saying this is what you need to do? Where is it that you and your own path of trying to come into your own autonomy, into embracing your path, right? Where is it that you're feeling conflicted even then? Because you're wanting to do that, but then you're allowing your people, your various tribes and various groups to dictate what it is that you're supposed to be doing.
Mm-hmm.
And so in one way, you have to accept responsibility in that, because when you start to really come inward, as we're talking about, literally going inward, you have to take responsibility. You're ultimately saying, all right, I am now aware of this, and so now what am I going to do about it? And some people might say, I just don't have the energy, and it might be so, because they are so tired from whatever it is. And I'll tell you, in a way, that's awesome, because you're so tired that when you just let go, then you finally are allowing God and universe to step in.
Mm-hmm.
And then that's when major shifts can happen, because you're not blocking it anymore.
Mm-hmm.
And that's like when you, and that's also kind of why, like, I didn't quickly, but I usually don't quickly grab onto trendy things anyway, because I'm always questioning, like, what's this about really? But I mean, like, the whole self-care, self-love thing, right? My thing with that, and then I ask people to ask themselves this, because when they're talking, they talk about this like it's self-care Sunday, and I'm kind of like, why isn't it self-care every day? Number one. But then two, if you feel like you have to go and, like, announce this, if you feel like, I'm taking part of this is my self-care and all of that, then in a way you subtly still have power outside of you,
Mm-hmm.
because you're not doing it from an empowering, I'm going to grow and develop from inside,
Mm-hmm.
right? Like,
I just want to bring up something that a thread that I'm feeling woven into everything that you're saying. And it's something that I really try to pay attention to when talking about this. And that is that we can look at it in the sense of saying, okay, if you're doing this, then you're still disempowered. And if you're fully empowered, then you won't be doing that at all. But the truth is, getting from being disempowered to empowered, there's a journey in between. And so having this conversation is useful in that we can inquire and say, okay, if I'm doing self-care Sunday, where is that thread of disempowerment and putting my power outside of myself? And how can I reel that in and have a fully inner empowered self-care experience? And it may be, a greater and greater percentage is inner empowered.
mm-hmm,
You're still doing self-care Sunday for a period of time, right? And that pretty soon we don't need that crutch of leaning on someone else. And I know that's been the case for me of, having teachers and practitioners for a long time that I looked to for that outer authority on my journey to having my own inner authority, and that they supported me more or less to
mm-hmm.
reclaim that inner authority in various ways. And that it was my responsibility all along the way of 25, 30 years of inquiring and questioning, just like you're talking about, and saying, is this really empowering me? What I'm doing, my attitude, my approach, is it really empowering me? What they're doing, their attitude, the people I'm in relationship with, what's empowering, what's not? How am I moving from being disempowered, not having my own inner sense of sovereignty, to being fully sovereign and having my own, being resting in my central core? And there's always layers of that
Yeah.
I mean, I'm going to be 50 this year, and I am still uncovering layers of, more and more subtle realms where I thought it was standing on an empowered foundation, and then lo and behold, there's something that is not that foundation that I was standing on, right? That I was resting on, and now I have to, like, okay, we're going to dig that up and uproot that. And so it's really a lifelong journey. And so I just wanted to bring that into the conversation so that listeners who might be like, oh, wow, so I'm still doing self-care Sunday, and I thought that was really empowering me, but now I'm hearing that I'm not empowered at all, and that can be very disheartening. And so, but I want to acknowledge is
Yeah.
those are really, if you came from a place of not having any self-care at all, and you started doing self-care Sunday, and you were in a place, and that became something that then could become eventually an inner practice. It could be a step along the way.
Yes. So, and I appreciate you definitely bringing that up. And definitely not in any way was I saying don't do your self-care
Yeah.
Sundays. It's more of me questioning or asking you to question yourself as far
Yeah.
as what is your intention behind it.
Mm-hmm.
Is it to be involved in another hashtag, or is it really in a place? And the thing is that if that is what caught your attention, then yes, that is a part that you needed to experience,
Mm-hmm.
right? In order to make that transition into, so like, I totally get it. And it's actually through those, I see it as through those experiences that when you realize that that was actually, it's to me, I just look at them as literally experiences. Is that something that was empowering? If I'm feeling this way about this, something there's I'm feeling it in my body, something's not right. So then in what way is this actually hindering me? Is this helping me? Like, and that's when you start to ask those questions.
Mm-hmm.
And then you start learning from that. But you do honor that experience.
Mm-hmm.
And I thank the people that were able to bring that experience to me.
Mm-hmm.
And it is, like I said that in the beginning, like this is a whole journey.
Mm-hmm.
And so when people are like, it's like I'm inviting people to shift their perspective and what they consider healthy,
Mm-hmm.
because that's a big thing right now, right? Like there's a lot of overarching issues that are going on, and not just in the States but globally. And I feel like a big part of that is because people consider this healthy thing being an like they just, I mean, what are some of the things that you see even in commercials? It's like somebody running towards this finish line and they're like, yes, it is insinuated that it is a finish line for you to be healthy.
Mm-hmm.
That creates such stress and turmoil,
Mm-hmm.
because now, and that's where you got to question, like, what is healthy for you? Like, my interpretation of healing is actually being able to walk in your life and experience what happens, and to actually be able to learn from that and shift from it and grow from it. What is, in essence, resiliency to continue,
Mm-hmm.
right?
Yeah.
That's my interpretation of healing. That means that this is a journey that for right now, you might experience high blood pressure. You might experience heavy bleeding, right? But that doesn't, just because the heavy bleeding stopped, you guaranteed you're probably going to find something else.
Mm-hmm. Right,
Right?
especially if you just used the hormonal birth control to cover up the heavy bleeding, right?
Yeah.
Later on, then you're going to be at higher risk for breast cancer and things like that. And so
Potentially, but it doesn't have to be.
doesn't have to be. Perhaps blood birth control is a valid option for some, but it doesn't have to be. Now, I know this was a thing for you. Have you discovered how birth control can be relatively healthy and not a higher risk factor for breast cancer?
I mean, it's not, I feel like with any of those and any other drugs too, like this is the position I'm at right now, is that they serve a purpose, right? It's once again when you become reliant on it that makes me question
Mm-hmm.
and ask you to question. So if you're using the, say you use the hormonal birth control for the heavy bleeding, I still question like why the heavy bleeding is there in the first place, and that the hormonal birth control is potentially just covering up what the other issues are. So like it's not to say that it didn't work. It worked on one thing,
Mm-hmm.
right? And then going in there understanding like, well, this kind of potentially opened doors for these other things, right? And so like things play a role. So yes, statistically or in studies, are they saying that, oh, there's birth control use, history of use leading into like those who may have had breast cancer? Could be hormonal birth control. It could be other forms of hormones as well that play a role. Because I believe that and really what tied it all together was more of, I'm going to apply this band-aid to so I can survive through my life. And if you look at the mental, emotional, and spiritual components of breast cancer, there is a sense of over nurturing. There is a sense of still you not um, potentially not actually exhibiting and manifesting and expressing your true self. So therefore, you're still masking it and creating internal stagnation. That internal stagnation prior to birth control use was showing up in menstrual issues, but it wasn't, that issue wasn't really resolved or worked on. And so therefore it just stayed and it just kind of transformed and transformed. And so now you're seeing it as breast cancer. You just so happened to have used birth control.
I see. So it's really the energetics of the issue that are causing the emotional components that are causing the heavy bleeding or the other menstrual issues that then translate into other health issues, like if they're not addressed, if you're not having some kind of um, self-reflection, meditation, overall holistic healing practice. And somebody who is doing that could take birth control pills, resolve the other issues, and perhaps even get off the birth control, and then the heavy bleeding is gone, or even stay on the birth control. And because those other energetic issues have been resolved, it doesn't turn into breast cancer.
And paradoxically, you have those people that are like, well, they ate well and they exercised and they still got cancer.
Mm-hmm.
Right? So then you have those people, because those are those that would question that type of lifestyle. Like, well, the thing is that it's still strong. Once again, it goes back to what was that person really like?
What
And
was their
then,
energetic? Uh-huh.
yeah, and then at the same time, like, who knows that even in their own life journey, to experience that was a part of their journey and that
Well,
they needed to learn it.
perhaps, and then also there's this thing that I don't know how much you've explored, which is that we inherit health risks from our families, and that they get passed down. So even if I were to live a lifestyle that was not considered conducive to a particular disease, if my parents lived the lifestyle that really was conducive to that particular disease, like, for example, drinking and smoking, I am still more likely to have those health issues than other people whose parents didn't do that.
Well, then that's
The
when
same
I
lifestyle.
well, in that case, if we take the drinking and smoking, my question becomes, why did they start drinking and smoking in the first place?
Right. And it goes back through the generations, like how they were raised, what was going on with their parents. And I feel like we have so much generational trauma given the history of this country and the world for the past millennia,
Hmm.
or several thousand years of terrible trauma that has been passed down, and we don't have that connection to healthy ancestors anymore. A lot of us who don't have an ancestral tradition like that, and there's so much trauma that's been passed down genetically that all of us are kind of, everyone born these days is kind of starting off with genetics, with DNA that's kind of like, not really fully able to express in the fullest, most healthy way possible. And then on top of that, we have the diet that is available, the food that's available now is nutrient deficient and laced with chemicals, even if it's organic, because the soils have been depleted. And unless we're really supplementing with enough herbs to get that kind of nutrients back into our diet, or growing our own food and really tending to the soil, and eating mostly that, then we're all coming up with a nutrient deficiency on top of all that. And then whatever genetic stuff are passing down. So even if you started as soon as you were autonomous from your family to live the healthiest possible lifestyle, given all of that history and the current environment of the cleaning products, and it's just, and then stuff in the air from, we're all wondering here in California how soon we're going to start to notice the effects of the nuclear stuff that went on in Japan a number of years ago. And there have been, theories about that. So it's like there's so much environmental stuff going on, and ancestral stuff, and that even the healthiest lifestyle, that turns into a traumatizing thing of trying to accomplish the healthiest lifestyle.
Well, that's exactly what I was getting at, as far as like what people want to deem as healthy. And the
Right.
thing is everything that you were just describing, actually, there's layers you could go deeper,
Yeah.
because somebody like, you might have an inkling, you might have been told like these are things that had happened in your family. And so yeah, you might say, yeah, we have a history of high blood pressure in our family. But then what caused that high blood pressure? Was it the stress of like, if you want to say it was, well, it was the stress of where they were living. Well, what
Mm-hmm.
was going on with where they were living?
Mm-hmm.
Well, they ended up having to work like 60 to 80 hours a week in this type of environment. They felt like they had to survive all the time. Really? Okay. Well, then in other ways, what happened? Well, then they just kind of, they weren't really home. I ended up spending a lot of time like going over here to over there and with these people. Okay. And then, so now for you, in what ways is it that you feel like you have to also be working 60 to 80 hours a week? And that to you is what is you living,
Yeah.
right? So it's not, this is where people get so tied up and hooked on a diagnosis.
Mm-hmm.
You have to remove the attachment to a diagnosis
Mm-hmm.
to really gain an understanding of what it is that you're being invited to shift.
Mm-hmm.
And like where I can see ancestry is there, and one could easily blame, one could easily get angry. Well, that's them. And but well, this is the thing. This now is your life, and this is your journey, right? And it's honoring that it played a role. So I'm going to be grateful in that now I get the opportunity to take this and transmute it
And then that
in
goes
ways that
back.
they did not see that could even be possible.
Yes, we're the
Right.
answer to their prayers. That's what I always say for my ancestral healing people, is that we're the answers to our ancestors' prayers. And when we find a way to heal these deeper energetics that you're talking about, that travels back through the generations and helps heal the spirits of our ancestors that didn't get to heal it in their lifetime. And
And
it
it
travels
moves
forward
forward.
as well. Exactly.
Exactly. Definitely moves forward.
We said exactly at the same time, Denise.
I got it too.
We just went. Woof.
And so it's like, I mean, like with all of this, I mean, it's what all this whole conversation, right? It's like, it can be just as serious as you want it to be, or you're actually about to turn your perspective and you're about to have fun with this.
Mm.
And you're about to really go in exploring and being curious as to why, like, wow, like, oh, I'm about to grow from this and I'm about to become this like powerful being. Like I think about Aladdin and like how Genie comes out, the old powerful being. Like, so it's just like
That's such a great image, especially for the womb stuff, because I feel like our womb is this source of incredible power that we've not been taught how that's true, right? And we've been taught to sweep it under the rug, to ignore it, all these things. And as we start to listen, just listening and saying, oh, this heavy bleeding I'm having, maybe it's got something to teach me. That alone, that shift alone is huge. And then the womb says, oh, you're ready to listen? I'm going to teach you all kinds of stuff. And it's so
yeah.
empowering to receive that inner wisdom finally. And that's often what's been what our body has been starving for. The exact nourishment that we need is to listen to our own inner wisdom, and then we're less susceptible to being invalidated by external authorities because they're not listening to our wisdom. Well, we don't care because it feels so good to listen to our own inner wisdom. And now when I go to the doctor, I tell them exactly what's going on for me and what I'm doing about it and exactly what I want them to help me with.
Mm-hmm.
And my doctors have intelligent conversations with me and explain and answer all of my questions. And I have no fear that any doctor would ever try to invalidate me. And if they did, I would tell them that they were doing a disservice to me and the rest of their patients, and that they needed to reconsider their approach to patients as partners in the healing process. And I would just say it just like that.
Mm-hmm.
And that would be the end probably of our relationship. I just like, that's it. I'm not putting up with that. And so I really encourage and I support my clients, as I'm sure you do with yours, to really embody that empowerment and listening to our own inner wisdom and seeing any symptom we have, whether it's too much bleeding, right? Or whether it's any other menstrual symptom or any symptom at all, the high blood pressure you talked about, whatever it is, as a message from our body, from our spirit, right? Of what we're here to learn and grow from.
Yep.
And so that's the ultimate message of our talk today, Denise, which is beautiful. Is there anything else, any last words of wisdom you want to share about that before we wrap up?
I was, the one thing that just stuck out is like going back to, and I feel like this will be a great wrap up, because to really help listeners to really assess what their goal is, right? I've been toying around personally with not really using goal, because once again, it keeps implying that there's this finish line, right? So even if you were to say, take your experience with complications of fibroids, or even with heavy bleeding, even with endometriosis, right? It's actually, like I said, a really great first step is to separate from the name, from that diagnosis. And then asking, what is that you can be learning from this experience? So if you came across something on Dr. Google saying like, like, well, stress can cause like worsening of symptoms in endometriosis, right? Ask yourself, in what ways is it that you could be potentially introducing more than what it is that you can handle right now? And then in what ways is it that you are experiencing a life that your body is literally chronically having to be on alert? That means if you're chronically being on alert, then what is that really saying about what you have going on in your life? In what ways is it that you are not feeling safe? In what ways is it that you're not feeling protected? Right? And that's all lower energy center.
Mhm. Yeah.
And it's just showing up, right? It's just showing up systematically because it's just built up in your system for so long.
Mhm.
And so when you're considering like, in what ways is it that I'd actually like to experience my life, you'd realize just from that example, actually, I would really like to be, in a position where I do feel safe. Like I'm not going to lose my job, or that I do feel safe with my partner. I do feel safe in my neighborhood. And I feel protected. Like I don't feel like I have to be on such an alert. So then that, when you come into that and you grow in that space, you begin to realize that the symptoms start to dissipate. You may not have endometriosis go away, quote unquote, which is why you don't want that goal. You don't want that intention, because your experience in your life, right, would be so much better and you'd be happier, but you still might have endometriosis because an endometrioma might be there, but you're not actually experiencing these harsh symptoms.
Mhm.
So that's
Yeah.
like, it's very subtle, very different in a way of seeing it, because like when you are constantly like, oh, I got to get rid of the endometriosis, what happens? That's when you start hearing from the women who've had 4 surgeries, 5 surgeries, 6 surgeries,
And then
because
you're
they didn't underlying deal with potentially what's actually rooted in this inflammatory process.
and then it becomes another reason why you should be in a constant state of alert, which is the real reason you're having all these severe symptoms in the first place.
Yeah.
Whereas what you're suggesting is, and I'm fully on board with this, is to first to take the time to really inquire like that. Unfortunately, when people though are in that state of feeling like they're constantly on alert and in fight and flight mode, it's very hard. It's very difficult to
To see
rest
outside of that.
into self-reflection enough, because that's not what you're doing. When you're in fight and flight mode, you're fighting in your flight and you're running away, right? Or you're freezing or you're fawning. You're not doing self-reflection. And
Mm-hmm.
so, there's a lot of practices that I teach that just help us to learn how, and I'm sure you do too, qigong and the yoga and the breathing practices and meditation, the part of the self-care Sunday, right? Which can be a great doorway into just carving out a little bit of space to be able to have those moments of self-reflection where you're not on high alert for a minute. Whatever you need to do to let yourself feel safe enough, carve out that time, whether it's to go somewhere away from the home to take a yoga class or a qigong class, or to see a practitioner that helps you feel totally comfortable, a massage therapist or acupuncturist, where you can just, your whole nervous system can relax for a minute. And that's where I get my insights that then are these guiding lights at the rest of the time, right? And asking those questions: why am I having these symptoms that made up this diagnosis? But we can't get there until we drop out of that high alert stress mode at least a little bit. And then when we get a foothold in there, then we can say, you know, I want more of my life to be this way, not stress mode, but in
Like
relax.
you had a little taste of
You have to have a taste of
and
it.
then all of a sudden you're like, I'm itching for it more. So like,
Exactly.
but
And
see,
then,
if you need that step, that's what we're here for. If you
exactly.
feel like you cannot do it or that it's no way possible, that is your key sign that there's somebody that can help you see that it is possible.
Yeah.
And then that's where it is that we can come in to help you see where it is that it can happen.
Yeah.
And because it can. It's just you'd have to say, I'm wanting this, I'm desiring it, I am making the decision that this is how I'd like this to be. And I know right now I just need a little bit of assistance. And then
There you go.
that's what we're here for.
There you go.
And you realize it's a part of the process and we're just there for the journey. And we're holding that space for you to see that there's another way of being. Right?
Thank you so much, Tanisha. That's what we're here for. It is. You said it so clearly. Beautiful. So if anyone did want to reach out to you and talk with you more about this and ask you about what's going on, get on your mailing list perhaps, where would they go to find you?
To DenisiaHilton.com.
So just DenisiaHilton.com.
Yep.
And that's spelled DE'Nicea, right?
Yep. But so in the website though, that URL, you know what? I don't even know if they take apostrophes. So it's really just DENICEA, then
Okay.
Hilton, HILTON.com.
Okay.
Yeah.
Excellent. And as if you've been listening to this podcast, as you know, if you would like to learn more about what's going on in the Womb Centered Healing Temple, you're welcome to visit wombcenteredhealing.com. As you may know, there's a new blog there that's been going on for a number of weeks that you can subscribe to there. And you just need to sign up for the membership. It's just a free membership that allows you to comment on the blog and subscribe and get notifications. So I invite you to do that. And also subscribe to this podcast wherever you're at, whether it's on YouTube or whether it's on Anchor or one of the other audio podcast formats. There ought to be a way to subscribe so that you'll get notified when there are new episodes. So thank you so much, Denisia, for joining us. And I would look forward to next time we get to talk. Yes. All right, that's all for now, folks. Until next time.